OneDrive, Teams and SharePoint, with so many different options, where do you actually save your files? That's a question I hear people asking a lot. In this video, I'm going to help you solve that mystery. Quick introduction, my name is Matt and I run a company called Labyrinth Technology. We help empower businesses with their IT and cybersecurity. You can find a link to my LinkedIn profile in the video description. Feel free to reach out. Let's start by taking a look at Microsoft OneDrive. Microsoft OneDrive is included in most Microsoft 365 subscriptions. Microsoft OneDrive I would recommend using for two key purposes. First of all, I would keep your personal OneDrive files in your OneDrive account, and I don't mean pictures of your cat or pictures of your neighbour's barbecue. I'm talking about files that are only ever really for your eyes. You never need to share them with anyone else in the business. So let's take a look. Okay, so here is my OneDrive account. Now, if you've got OneDrive set up, you'll notice that you will have your name and your company name on the left-hand side here. So make sure you are actually using your company OneDrive account on your company computer. Don't set up a personal OneDrive account and then use that on your company computer. It should be part of your Office Microsoft 365 account. You should be signing in with your work email address to that account. So in OneDrive, you can see I've got a few different folders here, including this folder that I've called personal, in brackets, demo. Now, if you're using Microsoft SharePoint, which we'll come on to later, you may actually have some folders in here from Microsoft SharePoint. And also, if you've got people that have shared folders from OneDrive, from their OneDrive with you, you may see that in this folder. So one of the first things that I recommend that you do in your OneDrive folder is to actually create a folder called personal that you use to keep all of your personal files. And that way, you know it's locked down. Nobody else has access to it unless you decide to share it with them. And then you can feel confident that the files you're putting in there are not accessible to anybody else. So if we take a look at this personal demo folder, now different people were going to use this personal folder for different things. I've put in here pay slips and HR letters, not because I've been in trouble with HR, but maybe you've got a letter about a promotion or about a pay review or performance review documents, your pay slips, your P60s, and whatever it is that you want to keep in here. Some people have files that they work on that just never need to be shared with anybody else in the organization. It doesn't matter if they are sick or if they leave the company and nobody can access any of these files. This is where you should keep those files. You can also use Microsoft OneDrive to sync your SharePoint files to the computer. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So here is my demo SharePoint document library. Now in SharePoint, you can sync, unless your organization has turned off this functionality, you can sync any folder or any document library. Now, if you want to sync the whole of a document library in SharePoint is the very top level folder. So we can see on the left-hand side here, that we've got this clients folder, which is the folder that I'm in. That is the top level folder. So if I want to sync that entire library to my computer, I would want to go right into that top level folder and then hit the sync button at the top here. Actually I just want to sync this one folder because I'm always accessing it and I would like those files to be easily accessible from my computer. So you just need to come in here and hit the sync button. And you'll see I'm already syncing this to my computer. We've got it right there. And I can see the exact same files right here as I can see in SharePoint right there. So the first time you click sync, if you haven't set up your OneDrive account yet, it is going to pop up and just ask you to sign in to your OneDrive account. You just need to enter your work email address and the password, and it will get you signed in and start syncing your files. Now, if you're concerned about space, you don't need to worry so much about that because by default, Microsoft OneDrive is only going to actually save files to your computer that you have accessed. So let's take a look under this status column and you can see these blue clouds and this green tick. The blue cloud means the file is not actually saved onto your computer or the folder. So here we can see under my file, we've got this blue cloud here. It's not saved on my computer, but I can see it on my computer and I can access it as if it were saved. What happens in the background when I double click on that is it actually saves it to my computer. There we go, it's open over there for the first time. So my file, so it's actually downloaded it in the background whilst I opened it. So there we go, you can see we've got autosave turned on at the top, and as I make changes they are saved in real time. So I can save that, and now I can close that file. And now that I've done that, you can see we've got the sync icon here, which means it's syncing those changes back up to SharePoint. So it is actually syncing the files down to your computer. You make changes and then it syncs them back up to SharePoint so that everyone else with access to that location can see the same version of the file as you. You may find if you do have tons of data waiting to be synced, which you can see by looking at your OneDrive icon in the bottom right hand corner. There we go, my files are actually all synced. You can see what files are queued for syncing. This file, now that I've accessed it, is permanently saved onto my device. I've got this green tick against it, so it's not going anywhere. The next time I access it, it's going to open a lot quicker, although it did only take a few seconds to open in the first case. So if I no longer wanted this file or folder on my computer, you know what, I'm done with this, I need to free up some space on my computer, you can right click the folder, and then with all these other OneDrive icons, you can just click free up space. And what that does is it removes it from your computer. It's still saved in the cloud, as you can see here, and it's still visible in your computer, but it's no longer taking up space. So this Santa folder is now there with a blue icon. I can still access the files in there, I can still see them in there, but it's not taking up space. Now, generally, you don't need to be messing around syncing, unsyncing folders all of the time, but if you were working with massive amounts of data, really large files, then it might become an issue over time. You might need to do some housekeeping every now and then. But generally, if you're someone who's just accessing the odd Microsoft Word file in different folders, let's say this Santa folder has 5,000 files in there, the odds are I'm probably only going to access a very small number of those, and it's only actually going to take up a very small amount of space on my device. So OneDrive is a very useful tool for giving you that traditional kind of file explorer experience for accessing your SharePoint files. And it's actually essential to use OneDrive to sync SharePoint files when you're working with specialist applications like perhaps CAD tools like AutoCAD, or maybe you're using Acrobat or Illustrator to edit files. It's a lot easier if you sync those with OneDrive versus trying to hook those tools up to SharePoint. Now, the Microsoft SharePoint web interface is what you go to in your browser. So if you're navigating to a SharePoint site in your internet browser like Microsoft Edge or Google Chrome or Firefox, that is the SharePoint web interface. And there's a couple of things that you can use that for. It's very good as an intranet, so you might find some useful information or useful news about what's going on in your company or some useful information about your company, but it's also a tool that can be used to display your SharePoint data in a very visual way. So you might set up a HR portal in there for your staff that has some links to accessing their pay slips or accessing the holiday booking system. But also you might just use this as a way of navigating your files. You can access all of your Microsoft Office files, all of your PDF documents, all of your image files within the SharePoint web interface without having to actually sync it with OneDrive. So let's take a look. Okay, so this is our service delivery team SharePoint sites. Now, generally people set up SharePoint sites based on different teams or business functions, but it really depends on your business and what your business needs are. So you can see that we've got these different folders, our clients, projects, this demo library that I'll show you, different information about our services, so our help desk contact information, our billing information, terms and conditions, etc., etc. And we've created these kind of visual tiles as a way of helping people to navigate through the folders in our SharePoint site. Now, if your organization allows you to sync content in OneDrive, you could just sync it to OneDrive if you find it easier. But we've set it up here in this nice visual way to encourage the team to come into SharePoint and see some of the other useful files and information that we've got here. You can see that we're now looking at the same files that I'm syncing to my computer in OneDrive. So if I click there we go, there's my file there. So if you have access to the desktop versions of Microsoft Office, you can set up your SharePoint site so that by default, when you open an Office file, it's going to open it in the desktop Microsoft Office application. But if you don't, and you're only using the web version of Microsoft Office, which does have some limitations, then you can leave it so that with the default option, so that Word, PDF, Excel, PowerPoint files will open in the web browser using the web version of Microsoft Office. So let's click on my file here, which is that file that I edited earlier. So I can see it was edited 8 minutes ago by me when I accessed it through OneDrive. Let's click on my file. There we go. So there it is with the changes I made and with autosave again turned on. So if somebody else opened this file via Microsoft SharePoint, we could both actually collaborate on this file at the same time, which is really powerful. You can also use the same functionality in Microsoft OneDrive for SharePoint files that you have accessed. But yeah, here we are. What I'm actually doing is just streaming the file. I'm not saving the file to my computer. It's not syncing it like you do in OneDrive. It's just opening it, and when I close it, it's not on my computer. It's nowhere to be seen. And what you could do is use SharePoint as your default interface for accessing most of your documents, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and then for the projects and then for any special projects that you work on, where you need to be able to edit non-standard Microsoft Office files, then maybe you want to sync that content to SharePoint. Now, if you just cannot get on with this new way of working using SharePoint as your primary way of accessing files, then as long as your organization allows it, you can just sync those folders using Microsoft OneDrive, as I showed you earlier. But let's say that you have access to the SharePoint web interface, you're syncing most of your day-to-day files in OneDrive, and you need to just access something that you don't usually have access to. It is useful to at least familiarize yourself with the SharePoint web interface so that you can go in, browse other files, and access them without having to just sync hundreds of different folders to your computer. The last thing I'm going to show you today is working with files in Microsoft Teams. Now, Microsoft Teams is a collaboration tool, and as such, you can save files and edit files and share files in Microsoft Teams. So let's take a look and talk about how you might do that. Okay, so let's come into this demo sales team, Microsoft team that I've set up. So when you share a file in a chat message, first of all, that is going to save into the Files tab here. It's also going to save to SharePoint though, because what a lot of people don't realize is that when you create a new Microsoft team, that is kind of sitting in front of a SharePoint site. So it creates a SharePoint site and all the files and content that is shared, all the messages, everything that's shared within that Microsoft team is actually all stored in a Microsoft SharePoint site. So I'm going to share a file here about our Microsoft Copilot implementation services. And once that has finished uploading, I'm going to click post. Now I talk about this in some of my other videos, but if you are sharing a file that's already in SharePoint with your colleagues, you don't need to download it and email them another copy of it or send them a Teams message with another copy of it. You can just copy the link to that file in SharePoint and share the link with them in Microsoft Teams to avoid duplication of data everywhere. But I'm not going to show you that today because that's not what this video is about, but I thought I'd mention it. So here we go. Check this out, guys, and let's click post. So now that I've done that, if I click on the Files tab and you'll see here that file is saved there. Now, generally what you're going to get with these teams is kind of unorganized chaos, because people are going to be sharing pictures in there, probably some informal pictures. Someone might actually send a picture of their cat in there, or something funny that they've seen, or maybe there's strict instructions from the company to keep these chats work related. I don't know, but I can almost guarantee if you go into the Files tab in your established Microsoft Teams, there are going to be all kinds of files here that are just all over the place. They're not in folders, they're not structured. And that's because when you share a file in Microsoft Teams, they just save here in this in a folder based on the name of the channel that you're in. So generally these are called general, but if you've set up a team more recently, you can actually change the name of that general channel to something else. So we've set up one called chat. You might have multiple channels in here, and you'll see here we've got these breadcrumbs at the top, so I can actually back out and go to the root here and see any other folders that have been saved kind of under Microsoft Teams here, maybe under a different channel. So that's pretty useful. But if I go into SharePoint, we've got this kind of dormant sales team demo site here. When I say dormant, you remember when I showed you earlier, our SharePoint site kind of had all of this consistent navigation menu along the top there, and that's because all of those sites were part of a hub. Whereas this is just kind of a rogue site on its own that's not really part of anything. And this is a really key reason as to why you shouldn't give your staff the ability to create their own Microsoft Teams. By default, they can, but you can actually restrict that using a couple of simple PowerShell commands, and you can set up a security group and define who is allowed to create them. But generally, we recommend just keeping that access back to IT so that you don't end up with all of these Microsoft Teams all over the place, and you don't end up with these random SharePoint sites sitting in the background, not properly managed. So yeah, this data isn't syncing in Teams. This data is in SharePoint. We are looking at SharePoint data right now. So how should you work with files in Microsoft Teams? Well, the key things I would tell you is, one, if the file that you're sharing with your team is coming from SharePoint, just copy a link to the file and share the link with the team so we don't duplicate data. And two, just be prepared for the fact that the files in here are not going to be properly sorted unless you've really set up folders in here and really educated people on how to file using Microsoft Teams if you want to use Microsoft Teams as a key way of accessing files. So that's something that you as a business need to decide with proper advice, and most importantly, you need to educate your users on what the correct tool is for working with different files. But generally what I find and what most organizations find is that Teams is a great way of collaborating on files for projects. So let's say we set up a team, or maybe just a channel under sales team for a particular project. Maybe your sales team in January has a New Year's sales drive, and you set up a channel specifically for that under sales team, and you've got all kinds of files, contacts, spreadsheets with contacts that you're using for outbound calling or whatever it is you do. Then it could be useful to set that up in Microsoft Teams, set up all the files properly in here, so that everyone can easily access the information and edit it and talk about it in the team. So it's a really useful collaboration space, but it's quite rare that I would see an organization using Microsoft Teams as their main method of accessing all organization files. Bottom line is, there are a lot of different ways that you can work with files in Microsoft 365, and you as an organization need to take proper advice, work with a professional like us to help you work that out. So let's take a quick recap. We've got Microsoft OneDrive, which is a great place for your personal work files that you're never going to need to share with anyone else. You can also use Microsoft OneDrive for syncing your SharePoint data to your computer if you don't want to use the SharePoint web interface. A lot of people do find it easier to just work with OneDrive for syncing their files. Microsoft SharePoint, the web interface, is a great tool to act as an intranet, but for people that are a bit more tech savvy and happy to embrace the change, then you can use that as your primary way of accessing Word, Excel, PowerPoint files, particularly if you need a more secure environment where you don't want people saving loads of data onto their computers, or if you've got masses of data. If you're a large organization, it could be really painful syncing all of that data with OneDrive. So the SharePoint web interface is a great way of navigating your files if it's been set up properly, if the navigation has been set up properly and the permissions have been done right. And finally, we've got Microsoft Teams, which is a collaboration tool. Any files that you share in the chat in your Microsoft Teams are going to be saved by default to a SharePoint site, and they're going to be visible in that Files tab as I demonstrated. And as I said, you can set up Microsoft Teams in a more structured way so that your teams can collaborate on particular project files, or maybe other day-to-day business activities, all within Microsoft Teams without having to go to SharePoint or OneDrive. I hope that's helped clear things up for you. If you would like some help with your Microsoft SharePoint, Teams or OneDrive deployment project, or Microsoft 365 in general, then please do not hesitate to reach out to me on LinkedIn. And as I said, the link is in the video description below. Please subscribe to our channel if you found this useful. I'd love to hear your feedback in the comments, and give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching.